whatever it is, wherever you are. Now, I thought we actually left this in a stable point, but apparently not. I guess I was starting to look at what would happen if if that was fetch token failed. Let's see, I think at this point, we're actually in a bit of a long window till there's until the full outage period. Is that in support? Yeah, that one's pinned. Oh. Yep, same basic problem I'm having. Okay. Yeah, so we're past this, and we're not yet here. So we still kind of got to hack up the authentication failure tests. And I feel like I typed the wrong thing in here. Although, I guess I did have this on my to-do list. What if we failed fetch a token? And that's just to blow up. Really. I don't really see how you can recover from that. HTTP response, auth failed for blah. There's no tag here. So this was starting to look at I think this is just like a debug to-do. And the way we simulate that is if our login information is incorrect. Env plain env token path. The token request it might actually be checking. Invalid, oh. So that's not an unauthorized. What exactly is 403? Forbidden. Okay. Well, it might actually be any error on fetch token would be fatal. String dot from int. Oh, I'm not printing the body in this case. That would be useful. Is that got us a generic HTTP error? Okay, so their messages include the actual status. Hmm? Lambda decode error. Okay, I see the to-do, which should have been I would think like an outright crash. I thought that was a point of to-do. Unable to fetch token. Well, yes, unable to fetch token. But how is that different from this? Because that's... Oh, no, okay, so here's... This is probably JavaScript. Oh, maybe this print is actually from JavaScript, in which case doing this doesn't do anything for me. Lambda decode error. Expecting a string. Field error. Event decoder. Would that be a bad status, or am I only recognizing certain statuses? Yeah, it's 200 for bad status. Oh, that's a Lambda event send. But we catch the exception because we're in a try catch block. Well, the try catch is really for the JSON parse. Unfortunately, we need that outside of here, so rip const. Well, do I want to return? Some closing block? Sure. Okay, yes. So that is an actual... We have a serious problem. So that's failure to fetch token. Which we were simulating. It's handler. Although we're going to need to simulate more of that. Although it's not actually checking some of this stuff or the other calls. Well, I guess I could try to catch that and return a response to some sort of error response to the caller. What would that be? That would not be a client. That would be a server error, I guess. Internal server error. That might be server unavailable. And it's either 500 or 503. Okay, so what does that look like? So instead of debug to do, I mean, really, is kind of any error fetching token means we didn't get a token. So it's almost like it's this, but it's specific to the fetch token case. Yeah, I guess all of these interrupt the flow somewhat. But some of these will have a useful state and some of them won't. And then you won't have a tag. Oh, this gets back to the execute all thing, because what we want to do is execute an error callback on everything. Send response, error response. Oh, so we're not even dealing with the code here. Lambda.response error reason. Reason is just a string right now. So send response is a decoder error. Okay, so that's for not found session. So we want to go over command message. Actually, you're going to be a model, and then we're going to have a revised model. Actually, you're probably going to go this way. Because we need the list of all connections. Just pending requests. And we're going to return and maybe we actually just want to store unable to process. At some future point. Oh, if I crash, might not be able to finish sending stuff out. So a pending request. Is a list request, which could be any of these things. And I was thinking I might want to wrap some stuff around this. Is this an actual structure yet? Yes, it's an actual structure. I might want to like pull session out to a more generic position. I don't care about the specifics of this right now. Okay, so the JavaScript, we probably should contain that catch more. So I think I need to work on the execute all before I worry about the error handling. So there's that state is equal to a value. There's that type. So you might need to have the request type. Or maybe it becomes a state type. Because fetch videos is really just user ID. It's request specific. And then like anything that's just kind of retry based should be able to use that. Do I actually use this anywhere? I use it once. Unless it's also used here. You've got your own type alias state equals value. Now, if I actually am reusing that name, it could become an issue, but that's a little bit of a local usage. So then, but we need something for the type of request state. Which maybe that could use enumerated parameters? Or we could keep doing that. Well, that's the record. Oh, I made this its own module specifically to have encoders and decoders for it. That's right. So we had the encoder and the decoder for this thing. So if we want to be able to encode and decode any state, you're going to have the like request type. So we might be able to do that. You only return a request then. You probably do have to expose state. No, you return a state. Oh, I was considering states that wouldn't necessarily have sessions left, but we've partially solved that by not even sending request. Oh, that's... Well, it's an encoded thing. But this does not work for HTTP requests that are the token requests. Because you cannot decode that generic structure. Or rather, they will not have sessions in them as such. Of course, like all the other Twitch requests we do will. That's okay, the states get stored there. That's where we can respond to, so it might be okay. There will be a fetch videos. It'll be more of a request. You know, there was a thing where we sort of produce a state value. All right, and then you depend on that. Oh, it doesn't encode what type of request it is. Okay, so that's the helper. So we're always dealing with our states. I guess it is still map 3, but this is going to be a double request. You know, my old convention was this. So that becomes this. So you actually have to do some like and then or something. Because we have to do something like field request string. And then fetch videos is just a fetch videos decoder. Now you to handle everything else. Now, I didn't name this state. Which is kind of unfortunate. It's not really mapping onto anything. Do I then have to map a constructor function over this? No, you get the request. This does the type of request. Or maybe this is where, like the Lambda decoder, we're just going to do it in line. Well, I do have to build a structure. All right, so what did we messed up this string. Yeah, that makes that a little bit nicer, I guess. So I guess that would still return type request. There'd just be a more specific type of decoder. Decode. Fetch videos. Oh, you're not going to be able to. I'm going to decode that. Okay, now we're in encode, where we somehow mismatched our brackets. Request. This is in handler. going to have to manage states. Right. I think I did a constructor for this. This is type request. But we have to be able to pass down the entire state. Yeah, and these are pending requests. They're actually pending states. So you have to be a state. Okay, state.request. Decode.fetch videos. All right. We need to decode the state. Which is a JSON value. And this is only interested in the session value, which is in our top level state now. So fetch videos would have to take a true state. Request, execute request. Probably pending requests has to become a list of states. Yeah, it has to track the reply for each one. So it needs the session. Okay, so that compiles. It processes, and we hope it returns properly. So that's a unit of work where we have the potential to handle session generically. And we've had this should retry flag hanging around, even though we haven't gotten there yet. So if we did an execute a send response, which happens if we get back our fetch videos right now. So that's a specific request. So I guess the respond to all is, well, no, when we get back our token, right now our step only executes next. So we want to change that, and not playing. Well, I mean, stepping in the right place might be able to do it. But we want to be potentially execute all pending requests that we're waiting on our session token. So model.pending requests. List.map, that was the thing. Right, and we have to command.batch this. That was weird. Did they change the fetch limit? Did I leave this in my multi? No. Huh, I got an abbreviated response that time. That's a little bit worrisome. All right. So technically, this could just be well, error response wants session. Which, from a new event standpoint, we just have that sitting there as our state. Wait, is that our state? Yes, it's our state. If we want to execute everything as an error, so I mean, we can do like respond to all with execute request auth as our parameter. Well, that's going to be a function that takes a state. States now always have a session. So we have the error response to a session. I had this function earlier, didn't I? Error response state versus error response session. So you're going to be a reason. That kind of suggests that we flip that argument in general. And I'm not sure about you. So then this is like for all requests. It's sort of an execute. And you have to be a function of state to command message. And that would allow us to do error response state to everything if we had to. Okay. So now, in theory, if we get, I completely removed this. I guess I haven't actually tried executing this. Okay. If we fail to fetch our token, error response with state. No, this is not going to be a... Yes, this is going to be a for all, because before we've... There's no particular state involved in this. Although... you might have a state that was the one that was called on, but all of these are waiting at this point. Okay, so that was our final response. Execute all pending requests. That's for the 410. So this is handling all requests when we get a, depending on fetch token results. I might want to do that for decryption as well. Because like, hey, we started up and we can't do our job. That's... An inability to decode. It's probably just been a to-do. Oh, we've actually knocked the to-dos down a little bit. What do we do if a decrypt error happens? We do nothing. I mean, it'll time out eventually. Now this is more of a user-facing error. Which, other than returning garbage, there's not a whole lot of ways to test that. All right, so we were trying to get, if we get back a 401, we now have a state that is just a Elm object where we can change our retried flag. Now, one way to handle this would be we do different events. I guess they're all stuff we get back. I mean, technically this way you could also, well, for the fetch tokens and whatnot, I don't necessarily have a detailed state object. That would be, what's our continuation? But you could wrap this stuff up in a function, and then you'd have like fetch videos and fetch videos retry or something. Although, so what do we do? We we attempt oh. Can I do generic state decode? No, because this thing is just going to be our session token. So we still kind of have to do some event-specific monkeying with it. Unless I have like app level update to update event to update request, where we do know the internal structure of the state. That could get a little bit weird because we have HTTP responses both in the setup and in the regular request processing stage. You'd almost need like separate events for those. So in order for this to work, we still have to do the decode state thing. And then update it, and then re-encode it for the next round. Unless I have fetch. I should have like a state.fetch videos constructor, right? Yes. When we get a new event, okay, you're in the queue. But then as we go back to our requests, we're back into JSON value. I could do something weird where state was a one-of decoder. That might be something known, or it might be just a JSON value, which will almost always decode. And then we could say, we could assume that was our session token. That's something that would have some bad effects of being able to decode anything in some other situations. Maybe I need multiple levels of Lambda events. It'd be a little bit weird because you'd have like two types of HTTP requests. You have like setup requests and regular requests. Maybe you could do some managing just in the Elm interface where they all come back the same, but they're tagged a little different. I guess the state was kind of supposed to manage that. And maybe I have to treat some things a little differently. So if this thing comes back with unauthenticated, well, so here's the problem. It's just any unauthenticated. So we have to attempt to decode a request state. And if we do, then it's retriable. Well, and we have to check the retry flag to see if we have already retried it once. If we have not, then we put it onto the, we update the flag, put it on the request queue, and go back to fetch token. If it does not decode as a request, or we've already retried, then it's an error. I need to figure out a better way to handle this. The request state, I haven't figured it out yet. So we had this idea of a thing that will update that, but that's all maybe result. Might not even be a validly decodable object. So we could have a function that does all the encoding or decoding and encoding and changing, but we need the value of the retry flag in between. We need the updated state when it's updated. We may need to queue this into our pending requests, so we're going to have to update the model. So the brute force method here and we want to do better things here. Then we have a state. So can you pattern match into a structure? Well, I also need to capture the value of it. I know that works. Isn't there something like that in function signatures? Yeah, it doesn't parse that. So then we have to go if s dot should retry. Pardon? Oh, because we left this down here. I mean, I guess you could do a result.map before doing this. Because we need the state to do stuff. So if it's an error, then something is very wrong. Well, Also, we can't send a response. But this could have been an error on some other request. Well, I want to know about it. If it should retry, if it shouldn't retry. Well, if authentication failed, if authentication is going to fail for everything. But I guess we'll get there eventually. So this means we have retried. We've gotten a token. And then this is the involved one. So when we initially get a new request, okay, you can do this kind of thing. So that'll just be the state. And then we were using step to what does step do? If we have n, so we have to clear out auth is what we have to do. And then step will reissue the fetch token. Right. Wait. I got these backwards. Now this is not state. This is state with, oh, and encoded. No, this is the queue. This is fine. Oh, model with you and what is this, like a maybe? Maybe secret. I almost feel like these should probably be swapped, because we definitely need to make sure we do that. And then, oh, by the way, we need to reschedule this. Okay, so it doesn't like error response. Oh, you're only the command. Now, okay, so that's successful. It doesn't actually care about the bearer token. So to get unauthenticated, we actually have to mess with client ID, which means it will never succeed. Right, but we do have a token, and it's not checking for those to match up yet. Okay, we tried exactly twice. Unable to authenticate. We fetched a token. We can't prove if it actually works. Well, without getting stateful in terms of bungling our authentication here. You know, specifically passing the wrong thing on the first request. So it took a lot of work to get there. This part wasn't so bad. After all of that work, making sure we had a flag and setting up the ability to track our state. I think in the JavaScript version, I had to like keep two different callbacks. It was like the one that tries again and like our ultimate callback that just fails, which we've kind of got by error response here. Well, I mean, we kind of did keep our ultimate callback around. And then this is our retry version, which is sort of inline here. On response, try again. I got that set up. Which is one of the main things we needed here. Now, we're starting to deal with this for multiple event types, which I'm not entirely sure what we want to do with that. Nor have I really looked into what these errors look like on the other end. So we still have kind of a clunky way of updating Lambda. What the? It looked like it had a URL completion. I guess I have to go pick that. What the? Okay, I guess it's time to restart my phone. Wow. I guess it's a good time to go get some more water and stuff. I'll be back in a minute. Looks like I have to look into my clips thing too. That was bizarre. Alright, so this is Lambda that needs to be updated. So index may have changed. I don't know if it changed much. And handler.js. This is still index.js. Okay. So now not in Lambda. In our regular schedule from videos, which now we need to be compiling the other end. And we need a server. Which is going to be very, very unhappy because the return format completely changed on it. But hey, at least we've got an error message. Fortunately, it's not going to be Twitch's problem anymore, it's going to be mine. Oh, so we've got a decode. Oh, yeah, this was all the stuff for my previous version, which was still in kind of twitchy terms. So, like, duration is an extra special thing. I converted these pretty much to, well, integers. One's going to be a POSIX. One is technically a number of seconds, which is not necessarily a POSIX. But I do have like an event decoder. It's just I'm not going to need duration. I'm not going to need ISO. Duration is going to be an int, and timestamp is going to be an int. Math over POSIX to POSIX, at least to POSIX. Oh, is it millis? Well, that's probably what I used to encode it. We'll see if the timestamps make sense. And then those types actually match. Or not POSIX, it's going to be time. Oh, that's an actual, that's the user's request. Okay, so I have done something here. Oh, I decided I was going to change it to events and didn't. Apparently that's what I did. Okay, so you're not the entire reply. And we have to go compile you. And that is going to be in the Elm. Okay, those timestamps do indeed seem reasonable. So in theory, well, I can't remove Twitch yet. Schedule graph. You're probably you're just using a duration int. So I think that module can go away now. Elm.json. I'm in source, aren't I? You are not doing a direct import of Twitch. Which means I don't think I need this anymore. Yeah. Oh, add. Well, I didn't add, I removed. And I've removed just fine before. Oh, something must have an indirect dependency on it, which is the Twitch API. But we should be able to get rid of the Twitch API eventually. All right. We are still currently using that for Twitch API for username lookup. Oh, now we have a design problem. It would be kind of nice. Well, they're API calls, so we have to make them through the server. But right now we're making separate API calls. It might be kind of nice to be able to make one call to the back end and have it do all of the Twitch stuff, and then return everything we need. But for this use case, we have two different ways we can go. We can link to a user ID, which is what we'd have if we just did that, like when we reload. In which case, we currently look up the username, as well as being able to get the data. And when we come in here, we can type a channel name, and it will look them up, find their ID, and then use that to get the videos. And then there's the extension use case where you presumably know which channel you're on. We don't really need to deal with the names. We've already got the ID from the extension. We only need the events. So the server code's been kind of gnarly enough that I don't really want to be copying it and tweaking it here and there. Maybe if I could kind of set up the Elm project where it's got a bunch of support files, and then you have this one little thing that's just, here's the stuff we fetch and how we put it together. You can do different endpoints. We've also kind of got the interface for actually requesting it, because this could all be like query parameters. It could be different endpoints. It's just API gateway. Oh, okay. Yeah, videos user ID. And eventually we're going to want to get like a prod endpoint, and we're going to want some metrics. We're going to, maybe we do some origin restriction. So we've got videos, user ID, which could conceivably cover both of these. We could do but we've got like, what do we want? And of course there's like videos, blah, 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 blah. The nice thing about this is that this is like stupid cacheable. Like you have to enable extra things for query parameters. Or we could do like videos only, videos name. No, I don't even need the ID. If I'm doing a name lookup, I don't care what your Twitch ID is. Yeah, these aren't going to be compatible. So that would make them different resources. Very similar, but different resources. These are different responses, and I don't want to always fetch the username because that's an extra API call for all the extension things, which are actually going to be most of the traffic. And we could do this in like, but then we don't have the sort of things beyond below, or the default CloudFront behavior of ignore the user parameters, URL parameters. You can configure that, but it's still, it's like, well, these are kind of different resources. Username lookup is kind of a one-off thing. So caching is going to be less important there. Now we could actually, there's always, we just go back to making separate requests. It might be reasonable for name lookup. That's going to be more of a one-off interactive thing. I don't like any of the options. This seems really verbose. Got to set up a couple things. On the back end, that turn into two different events. We can keep the state with what we know, use that to guide what we want to receive. So fetch videos should always be, well, yes, that's going to have to switch on the kind of request to determine the kind of response. If it's a multi-step process, we're going to have to start, well, yeah, I guess that'll be incremental states, and then it'll return based on the request type that we have built up over that. Maybe I've been trying to name these by what they do. We could do and I could sort of separate this by, and I probably should actually separate the, have a separate deploy point for the extension. But even below that, I really should have something here in case we need to have multiple endpoints. And then app can look up by user ID or by name. But it gets one thing. And then, do you name the endpoint after the argument it takes, or by the information it returns? It's like name is kind of back to videos, but it's by name. If it's by ID, we also need to look up the username. Maybe I should just have a separate call for username. It's only going to get used in the app. Which shouldn't have nearly as much traffic. It seemed like, oh, gee, if I'm going to get my own server, what if we were able to service in one call? So your video's only by user ID. I mean, you can be very literal about this. Actually, I don't need the ID. But I have to do like by name. I mean, it's technically ends up kind of being the same as this. You could probably arrange to make it a redirect. That, not sure about doing that in API Gateway. Now, I guess ID is exactly the thing I need. Yes, I do need the ID so that I can set the URL so that we request this next time. Now, there used to be efficiency for me to request to have the ID first, because then you can request the videos directly, and you can kind of patch the username in parallel. There's not. Well, no. IDs are stable. Usernames can change, so you don't want to set things up to like link to the username and just have the front end app always dealing with that. ID is going to be far more stable in terms of who that is. On that front, maybe a lookup form of the username lookup would make more sense, although the responses are also somewhat subject to that. But I mean, we won't be caching these things terribly long. You want the schedules to update maybe 24 hours to get recent changes. But the usernames can change thing. Does make me wonder if that should be more of a query style thing. And then we just have two data endpoints with name and without name. And the username would only be used interactively. It would actually be a little sub-process that would only look up the ID, and then we would kind of go back to all of our regular stuff. So that would be like a user. So we could do username, or we could make it more of a proper query. For caching purposes, we would then have to identify that as a parameter. Always wondering if I'm prematurely optimizing by putting things together. And certainly the Twitch API itself separates them, but that's a general purpose tool. This is a application specific tool. So that means we're going to have to deal with different events and with multi-step events. Handler, just Lambda event, event, event. Yeah, so all we're sending right now is user ID. Now, on the gateway front, we can decode these however the heck we want. So we could decode one thing as like, we could encode this as like include name. We could have an event name. Which would be useful on the event front for determining what other fields to decode. So that's the multi-step process. So this comes in at new event, which only knows how to decode one type of thing. So this is going to have to be a multi-purpose decoder that can encode essentially, I think, what exactly equal request. So our states will get more complicated because we'll have like every state of that, and it's not just we can transition to the fetch video state because we also have to keep around the user state in that instance. Okay, so this is the so arguably the Lambda events coming in are not necessarily going to be the same as my internal state of these things. We've got a reply that might actually, is this reply in code? Right now it is, yes. And the reply actually only has the video encoder. Which I think used to have like all the, well, no, I wasn't really doing as much stuff before. Right, this is encode. Oh, it was just for the video type, okay. But now we're potentially going to have to decode multiple types of requests. So there's the requests coming in, and then there's the internal states. And even though those might be very similar, I don't know if I should merge them. Maybe I need like event decode. And I probably need to come up with a different name than request for all of the things that we're still waiting to do. Now, Lambda first. And then this is in handler, which has this. And you're going to be a standard decoder. I don't currently have centralized types. Right now we never encode events. You're going to have to be a type, which unfortunately is going to look an awful lot like my other type, but with fewer states. And here's the problem. And I guess I have to leave those qualified. Oh, that's the event message. Which we received an event. Oh boy. I need to take a break. I also want to take a quick look at this thing. It's starting to bug me. Okay, so that needs a login. And it works fine. Now, I don't have a skip to next thing on here. Huh. Then it would be loaded rule set.
But I like.
Hmm.
I'm the kind of person that likes to max.
Maybe I need to relog in?
Okay, so I must not have assigned that one before on this guy.
In which case I'm gonna need, but it still said logged in. I might have to do some in-app debugger stuff because I can't get to a regular debugger there in OBS. So this event is a new Lambda thing. And I think that's the only place I have to deal with you. Now I wouldn't be able to import this as, well, if I had an event before, I'd be able to have an event here, I guess. But you are going to follow the map, the model of, we have videos, and I guess there's actually a fair bit I can do here before we deal with this. I mean, it's still going to be a videos event, which is still an event. So is this... Do I still call this videos request, or is it a videos event now? Right. And then it's kind of, that's this thing. And you have to have a fail. You're gonna be very, very mad right now. Okay. Oh, right, because this is decode value. Oh, so I guess you are going to be a JSON value. This is going to be event.decode as decode. Oh. Now you see, I want to say event dot. I guess it's got to be event. I want to be able to say event dot video state or whatever. But it's not going to be that. It's going to be some kind of too many events. And then a case E. Which is the only case we have to deal with right now. Wait, this is where we can, I keep forgetting I can do this. It's like I use it in the update handler. And then I forget about it other times. There was someplace else I think I had to do something like that. This is event decode. I always forget to declare it twice. Videos event. You have to expose that. You have to expose all of that. Oh, right, you're not a single argument function until we do the structure upgrade. We used to have a structure name there that we could use for that. You are a decoder. Did we not decode this in state? Ah, so it's that kind of thing. Cannot find a videos event. Wait, this isn't the equals videos event? Oh, type alias. decoder event. It says a decoder event. Does not need to be decoder event. That's weird. Did we miss the end then here? Yes. Don't need two of those. Actually, if I kept that in there, then I wouldn't have to qualify it as much. $35. Right, and this is handle. Okay, so that should all go back to working. Really, why is... Right, because we did put the tag in there. And there's no more information there. Unless we want to decode this to the same event, and then on this side we have a Boolean flag for that we need to fetch the name. But these are going to end up handled somewhat differently. I guess I could put the common step first and have the state figure it out, but yeah. All right, so that's a trivial way, a very, very trivial way to get it to compile. But we now need a state for every step of this. So we are... So we have the state where we need to... I guess the order doesn't really matter. For this one. We could technically have our state. No, if they come back asynchronously, that could get really awkward. I have to be keeping my state outside of the request itself. So we have the waiting to send state, or we just have the user ID. We have pick one to get first. I guess maybe the user lookup is cheaper. So now we've got that. And then I think the only thing we can get back at that point is our final request, which we don't have to statify again. So right now, we only use this constructor for the initial time. I might want streamlining for these state updates. Now see, the weird thing is the event name is with name. And our encoder and our decoder have to deal with this. I guess I have some freedom to not necessarily follow like what you might see in the Twitch docs or whatever. Try and use this in a more consistent fashion. So state decode. That was an interesting one. Now, this is not so easy to just pipe into a map to. I guess this is where having the named constructors helps. Mm. So we get a value. We apply it to that map call. This pipeline is so nice until it's not. As soon as you flip things around, then you've got parentheses everywhere trying to make the flow make sense. Well, wait, map 2 should be 2 arguments. So how does that work? So that applies 1 argument to it. It returns you a function of 1 argument. That seems a little weird. So I don't think that's worth maintaining the flow, even if it works. Which means we have to invert the entire thing. So map that, and we've got parentheses again. Onto that. And then handler doesn't handle these new possibilities. All right, so actually making it do this right is going to be a whole nother battle. Okay, so that's the event. This is down here where we say what to do with it. Okay, that compiles. Somebody's getting a big delivery. So like this is going to be the same call. I need, well, no, it's the state. Well, one of these is going to be fetch name. And then the state, I think, will determine what we do when we come back. So this is going to be fetch user by ID. Which will have a little bit of this. I want to split, thanks. That's user by ID URL. Now, this is going to be a path. Videos path. Oh. Oh, that was videos. This is fetch user by ID path. Huh. So I've been using the state to maintain information. I might not need the tag. Well, the tag is useful when we don't have all that stuff in state, so. Now I own my other app. It was just, oh no, actually it is. I did have a user, a by ID versus by name specific tag. However, we no longer have all events are handled protection. I could maybe do something that translated states back to messages and made it a little bit more like standard Elm. You'd still have to do that translation, though. All right, so fetch videos. Now that's going to immediately send a response. Fetch user by ID. This is not going to immediately send a response. And this is doing encode, 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 encode. So this is a result at this point. I'm curious what's going on here. Well, I guess I missed the delivery. Huh. I mean, I could sort of say this thing gets decoded with blah, blah, blah. As long as you're in each tag, and then we like go back to an application event that handled the higher level stuff. So technically we get back a users array. We only expect one. Before we were able to match on, we got back one. So this is a result with default. Well, now we need to do a list.head. Now it's a maybe. So if no users were found, we need to send back an error. If a user was found, we want to do the whole decode, update our state business. Now, so one way to handle this would be to update our state, push that back on to our request queue, and then step which would do the dispatch for me as long as all preconditions were still met. Well, I did have a state decode state there. So you're the maybe user. Now I guess I could map this down to username. Send error response. Oh, I do need session here then. How do we do a multi-step process? So step was checking our prerequisites. So really it's executing one request. Oh, but it's decoding all of this junk. And saying, well, yes, it's decrypted. Yes, we have an authentication. But this assumes we have decoded state, which we don't know that we have decodable state right now. That is kind of what we were doing here. And it's still a result. That's a maybe. Oh my gosh. You're a result state. Something has gone very, very wrong here. Is that the right response here? If we got an unparsable state to a request, to this request, something is very, very wrong. Actually, for this one, we could just do oh, and then I could do users here. And we still have to do case users. So it's kind of the same thing. It's a lot the same thing. So here's where I need, I guess, a constructor for the other state. Of course, now we end up with a positional constructor anyway. Now, really, all we're updating here is the one field. The rest of the stuff gets maintained. We can get this from the user. because it really should be the same. Oh no, it's just user.id. This probably should be display name. Okay, well that hit right on the update check. Now, we're going to send the same fetch videos request. Well, and we're not even doing our new update yet. So that still works. Probably to make it easy to keep track of things, I need to go back to here. Auth, user ID, state. The state makes it determinable, which we were doing. It's almost like every state wants to be its own event response handler. Yeah, so there's got to be a better way to pull a function out of here or something. And there's this, which so far has only had to do one thing. However, now we need to do something like this. Which would be kind of nice to do at the update event level. But there are some things that don't use the same state model. Maybe there needs to be a two-level interface here, where at HTTP response, we assume the state. At some of these other things, we don't. And this is where you could maybe redirect back to application events. And this is itself in an application event, so that's a little bit of a recursion. You could essentially, okay, well, we got an HTTP response. It was this event, so we're going to call it that event. Because it was an HTTP response and maybe certain other things, we know we can parse the state. Well, so that's not an application event. That is update event, which has the state parameter. So is that specifically for API responses that, I mean, I guess you could maybe do other processing, but in practice? When an HTTP response, I guess we could have our own little, well, at some level it has to be a string. You could do a mapping, but at some level it actually is a string. All that would do would be the state decode for you. And maybe if you looked it up by type to get that, then you could come up with a default decoder for it. The other thing to do would be to save the state well, to get the state in some sort of like request transaction ID. Save that in the data structure. Then you go pull it out when it comes back. I'm just afraid about losing track of things. So you've got to have a timestamp and check for expired things. So send response only gets the session. This has already been encoded, which we can't quite jump this far yet. I guess it's really just the response. We had send response deal with the result status of session. Oh, actually, I could have this prepare its portion of the response. You know, in code.user. And then this thing would actually, instead of having user, no, I need user ID to make the request. It would restore like the partial response. I'd need a type for that. Try something different. It's definitely awkward to make it work, so it's kind of a brain stretching exercise. A lot of the kinds of things you have to deal with here are taken care of by the Elm runtime. So this is kind of a way to understand a little bit of what must be going on there. In particular, with this project, it got a little hairy when I had to do authentication updates. If it was unauthenticated, that might have been an expired token, so you attempt to get a new token and retry the request. When I just did that in JavaScript, they ended up having like 2 different callback functions, like one for if you retry and one for you don't, and I was getting kind of confused. It took a lot of work to get there, but when I put in the actual retry, it wasn't too bad here. But the ways I'm having to kind of manage state because I don't have the Elm runtime doing a bunch of stuff behind the curtain is where it's getting awkward. And I guess I haven't liked the fact that you can't look behind the curtain and like do something unusual if you really needed to. But I also haven't found a good place to put my own curtain yet. That is certainly more of a full general purpose language. And I presume that they have, actually I'm not sure about F#, but since it has to interoperate with the rest of the CLR stack, I presume there's some means to, handle some statefulness and things. Or, do direct FFI instead of having to throw stuff over an asynchronous JavaScript bridge. So I'm kind of hoping that if I work with this long enough, I'll start to see some patterns that I can compress down into some functions or different abstractions. On streaming or on F#? Okay. So F#. Twitch has changed their API such that it is going to require authentication for every request. You used to be able to just kind of get a client ID and query it. So I had a whole bunch of, like fully client side, in the page things. Like this one, nope, wrong window. Which does a schedule based on actual streams by looking at the videos the streamers recorded. And that used to be able to work completely client-side. But with the authentication requirements, you either have to have the user log in, or you have to have a server that can hold a secret value to request tokens. The login would be okay for this. It would be inconvenient, but okay. Yeah. But this is also a Twitch extension that is meant to be used as a panel. And panels are intended to be used by anyone visiting the profile page, including people who are not logged in or who don't want to be bothered to log in. And really, we have no other reason to have the user ID. It'd be kind of weird if we were requesting it. So that means I have to do the server version. And I'm trying to do that with Lambda so that it, is just a request here and there, maybe a cache in front of it. Instead of having to have have and maintain a full-fledged server just to proxy some API calls. And I'm also trying to do, more than just proxying API calls, which, to be fair, is causing me some trouble here. To an extent, I mean, there was definitely a lot less code in the straight-up JavaScript version. So I have this little test file. I mean, they're probably very similar. So this is for local testing, so I don't have to test everything on Amazon. I mean, it's just, there's a handler function in the module you expose. It gets a JavaScript object in the JavaScript version and a context object, and it does, the error response thing. This handler is just sending it over to an Elm port. I'm using the sort of more bare Lambda interface. There's the API gateway integration has another version where they give you sort of this digested request thing and expect to have this sort of JSON representation of a response with status code and body and headers and whatnot. I kind of wanted to do that stuff at the API gateway level. And then sort of have the function just dealing with the things it cares about, more as a function than as a API endpoint itself. But I mean, I presume these are functions going to be pretty similar. You have some entry point that gets some information and then it returns something. Thank you for the follow. But sort of keeping track of this callback through everything that's happening and also keeping track of the state of each request. Now, I'm being overambitious here. I'm trying to run it as if we could have multiple concurrent requests. That would take care of, for instance, if it decided that it timed out and gave us another request, or we still had our own asynchronous stuff working for the first one. If I treated it as pure single process, it would be a little bit easier because I could use the Elm model to keep some of this stuff. Just okay, we're working on one user ID. We're going to have one callback. You kind of build up stuff there and then respond. I'm trying to keep it per request. And that kind of means encoding things and then uncoding them. I've heard good things about it. I kind of want to play around with plain old Erlang first so I understand kind of what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah. Erlang is definitely not a stock Lambda language. And since since Lambda only gives you one request at a time, concurrency wouldn't be useful here. If I was going to run my own server to do this kind of proxying requests, something on the Erlang VM might be nice. Because one of the other reasons I wanted to mess with Lambda here was so that if it did kind of grow, then I could maybe be sharing some code back and forth. All I'm using right now is my Twitch data structure decoders. Main.elf. Do you mean Elm? Or are you talking about something with Elixir? Main.elm. Ah. Yeah. The default style of Elm is like one big file until you need to split it. So like this one's 200. There's a bunch of stuff in the. I've separated out my view. It's file order independent, but you do have to declare them. Yes. And then for specific applications that have a lot of those things that could blow up, yeah. All right. Handler. Aha. Okay, there's a lot of control stuff here. Not all. It's a kind of a medium-sized app. There's some navigation going on. Okay, that's general upfront stuff there. A lot of a lot of little helpers. A lot of white space. Ah. Well, that would explain the large indent too. And then there are sub messages. Yeah. and the views in this file. So yeah. So 1300, and then I usually pull up my views for ease of using the HTML stuff. I mean, for the most part, it's pretty standard. And there might be some places to do some helpers, but I really have to dig into it to figure stuff out. Seems like there might be some room to abstract something here, but as I said, I have to dig into it. Yeah, and like these nested data structure updates, I think I need to learn better patterns there myself. If you try to organize things, you're gonna have to dig down into them. So maybe there's some room for helpers there. At least make it look nicer. It doesn't really solve the nested structure problem. And for a big app, the model itself is relatively dense. That's probably some of that nested stuff. So that's well, this is relatively understandable in terms of just the amount of stuff there. Mine, I tend to go for flatter models, so that tends to get pretty big. So route, login form, registration form. This is all going to be application specific stuff. Oh, yeah, one would presume from your earlier comments. One thing I've been tending to do is I pull the view into a separate file for, in part to scope to just import like the HTML stuff for ease of reference, and then only have that in the view section. And then I also collect the messages sent by the view, and then usually I'll call it like UI as the application message. And then that kind of groups that stuff up into a chunk. I don't go the full like trying to do a separate update. It's still one big update function for the most part. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I saw the controls and stuff. And I guess maybe those are controls that are doing all these little sub messages things. Yeah, then yeah, there's the web. Well, I mean, these look like web surface responses, but maybe there's some more processing going on in the other files. With some of the other apps where I was doing interactive OAuth login for Twitch, I've started pulling out the response to centralize the error handling in case we need to log out and try again. Okay, adapter, decoders, encoders. Yeah, that's pretty common. Encode and decode. Or pretty common for my code anyway. HTTP post, HTTP send. Yeah, for the Twitch stuff, I often have to do custom headers, so I end up using the more involved forms of those. So this looks like it's just all of your request functions, and maybe that's interacting with a gateway. HTTP success. So you've got your own success function. Hmm. Yeah. Was this custom operators? Because I'm not immediately parsing that syntax. Although that's a common operator in Elm, so. Hmm. Oh no, that's a type alias, so that's a function. Okay. I was looking at that as actual code. Okay, so these are just handy references. Okay. Hmm. Yeah, I've mostly done my own code. It probably would be good to spend some time looking at like the example single page app and just other Elm stuff. Well, I mean, yeah, if you stop working on it, then yeah. Yeah, it's kind of the thing, but it's not necessarily a good development environment. Well, I've liked it for certain things. Like some of the early apps I did, it was pretty nice. But now I'm trying to push the boundaries sometimes. Like it's not a good environment for Lambda functions. Maybe if you were able to do some runtime stuff, it could be. But if you had the appropriate HTTP library, if you had subscribe to Lambda event, but like I said, they're all that stuff is hiding complexity that still has to happen, and it's nice that the library does it once. I would be a lot more okay with it if they were user libraries that you could replace if you didn't like how the standard one handled it. Not really. I messed around with OCaml once, and then when I got into the actual object-oriented part of it, I lost the type inference, and it got really verbose. Of course, Elm, I think it has some type inference, but it's like really, really against standard practice, and it gives you better error messages to have them there. Yeah, Camel was interesting. It was more of the interactive, REPL style. Yeah, you kind of like try something out until you get it, and then put it in your code. Then if you edit something, you have to kind of go re-enter all those signatures. Yeah, it's been interesting how I got into Ruby to escape some of the stuff in C. And then now everything seems to be swinging back towards static typing. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, closure was a big thing when I was still kind of hanging out with conference circles and Ruby people and whatnot. I haven't been as active in community stuff, so I haven't had as big of an idea of what's hot these days. And refactoring is one thing that frequently comes up discussing Elm, in terms of having all the static checks there to make sure you haven't done anything terribly wrong. Hmm. Yeah, I know they kind of stumbled into being a big data science thing. Yeah. Yeah, I know I tried messing around with some Python for game stuff a long time ago. I don't remember specifically why I stopped that. I think maybe one of the projects I just kind of got stuck on trying to make art for it, and I just didn't end up really using it for anything else. I do remember having some trouble with implicit variable declaration, where you'd typo something and it would not be the right variable, and you'd be scratching your head for hours. Ah, does Scala not have those? That's another one I've never gotten into. I mean, the multi-paradigm thing sounds interesting, but I've seen a couple conference talks that were getting kind of out in the stratosphere about how to do various things in it. But I think this might be a problem for a different day. So we are in fact working on multiple event types, partly implemented need variable, fetch, videos, response. Okay, so tests are tests. That's a project file. That looks like a type definition. So project, event ops, table operations. Okay, so this has some stuff too. I know of, what's the right term? Sort of event-oriented databases as a thing, but like event store as a specific technology, no? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as a general concept, now what specifically has been what specifically is done with a implementation or general practice? No. Or is Event Store like a specific Azure technology, like Lambda is a specific AWS implementation of functions? It's both. Okay. So Event Store is a general pattern, and Microsoft called their version of it Event Store, which I think um, Amazon has some similar things. So it's a concept and it has products and services. Yeah. Oh, it's not. Okay. You're talking about Azure, so. Ah, okay. So it's just that site that has particular products and services. Oh, yeah, I saw that there was a test folder, but that wasn't necessarily where, well, maybe that would be good for getting a sense of what it does. Well, okay, that wasn't useful. Yeah. Personally, I've never liked the super aligning things just because something changes and now everything's out of alignment. Now, I guess you do use like the Elm format or something like that can keep making all those little adjustments for you. Sure. I never liked maintaining it myself. Uh, well, yeah, there's that too. I mean, just either it ends up, if you don't maintain it, it looks bad, and if you do maintain it, then you're adding and removing spaces all the time. It could add some noise to source control as well. Although there's usually options to ignore white space changes. Yeah, I've actually considered if I ever had time, it'd be interesting to try and do a pure structural Elm editor so you didn't have formatting at all. And I guess there'd be the formatting the editor used to display it, but you'd never have to deal with spacing or indent. It would just be, the abstract syntax tree essentially. Yeah, well, I was kind of deciding if I even wanted to try and figure this out today, and yeah, well, I need to tap out for lunch and stuff sometime around now. So thanks for stopping by and giving me somebody to talk to. West Coast. I'm Central. It's getting a little bit late for lunch right now. I will sometimes leave earlier. So actually, my afternoon stuff is going to be really late now. Ah, okay. But thanks for stopping by. Yeah. Thanks to the subs and to everybody who hosted me. Let's see. Do we have any other? That's some JavaScript web app programming. Oh. Okay, so that one's having some. Seems to be having some API issues as well, even though it's not getting errors. Interesting. And then this, well, that one's still working. Yeah, I'm going to have to investigate this as well later. It's not giving me any errors, but Anyway. I'm looking for someplace cool to hang out. Sean the Best is working on some JavaScript web app programming. And thanks for hanging out with me. Goodbye, and until next time.